Karsh, you're a pioneer of global fusion music and really a visionary music composer and producer. You recently released your new album, which has 5 tracks and one has vocals by Malini Avasthi.
Yes.
Please tell us more about the album and composing music while the world is battling this pandemic.
Well, I mean, this album was actually created in the entire time that I was in lockdown, first in Brooklyn, New York, where I had originally just gone for 3 weeks to do some shows in March of 2020, and then got stuck there after all cancellations and flights got canceled. And so I was supposed to return to Goa, and 8 months went by before I was able to come to Goa. So then finally in August, I came to Goa, and throughout the time that I was in Brooklyn, going through all of the different things that I was going through as the pandemic was happening, as the Black Lives Matter movement was happening. New York was, just a hotbed. It was the epicenter of the pandemic at that time, and there were protests happening all over the place. It was an exciting, scary, anxiety-driven time, and I had a lot of things to say, and there was the only outlet I had was to make music. So a lot of these tracks kind of started in Brooklyn, and then some of them finished while I spent the next 6 months in Goa during 2020.
Sure. So that means is it right to say this is more personal work than your last album on which you collaborated with many singers?
I mean, all of my albums are very personal. They always start from a personal place. This album was different, obviously, because because of the nature of lockdown, I wasn't really able to collaborate with that many people. So I started to concentrate on working on pieces that I could finish myself, which was, and that's the only real difference, which makes it even more personal, is that most of the album is myself. There's only a few collaborations that I had with people, one, Malini Avasthi being one, Ajay Prasanna being another. But otherwise, mainly it's myself in the studio.
The track which got me hooked from the new album is Sunset Sketch. Has a very soothing feel to it. What was going on in your heart, not in mind, while composing that track?
Well, it was about connecting. I was speaking to a loved one who was sitting in Bombay watching the sunset as I was watching the sunrise in New York, and kind of trying to connect those moments as one. So that piece really came out in one go, in one kind of sitting. It wasn't anything that I had to keep on coming back to. So it was truly inspired by that particular moment, and after being apart and being away for so long, it was a way of reaching out.
The other track from the album, that's Fist of Fury. And if I say that song has Karsh Kale stamp all over it because of the beats, and especially the one from Tabla.
Yeah, I mean, that is something that I've, on most of my records, I always kind of include 1 or 2 tracks, which I kind of call the Liquid Tabla series, which are oftentimes, odes to Bruce Lee in some way as well. And it's, they're electronic, usually dance-driven Tabla tracks. And Fist of Fury, of course, is also the title of a Bruce Lee film, and was kind of the inspiration for the track, for this particular track. But like I said, if you hear them in a series from One Step Beyond, which was on my first album, all the way through to Fist of Fury, there's kind of a thread that I keep through those particular tracks.
Would you please like to play something for our viewers from this new album?
What I can do is I can play something interpretive on the tabla,
Sure.
that I played on the album.
Karsh, you have composed the background score and 2 songs for Gully Boy. The songs were, of course, Kab Se Kab Tak and the train song.
Hmm.
What I want to ask you is the film, of course, was set in slums in Mumbai and spoke about the hip hop scene in Mumbai. While working on Gully Boy, did you learn something? Did you draw a line in your head, saying to yourself that okay, I don't need to cross this line, just to ensure that the music sounds more like Mumbai and not like NYC?
I don't think that I had to make any kind of conscious choice in that regard. Also, I mean, because I was working on the background score, I wasn't working on a lot of the actual hip hop was coming from different producers and different artists. So what I was doing was weaving music and working with the Salvage Audio Collective to, create a sound that became a framework for that music, because the rap music was the main character. So what we were creating was a backdrop for that. So I don't think I really needed to keep New York out of it. In fact, there was one part of the background score where I was rapping, and I did a New York style 90s rap, which was supposed to be a moment where that inspired the main character, Murad's character, to go in his car and start practicing a rap. So in some ways, I did have to bring a little bit of the New York sensibility to what I was doing. But like I said, there was a lot more and a lot of different styles of music that were addressed in the background score besides hip hop.
What difference or similarities you find while working on Gully Boy between the hip hop scene in Mumbai and New York?
Well, I mean, I think that the thing that makes it analogous, because I was there in New York. I mean, I was growing up. I was a young kid in the late '70s, growing up in Queens, New York, and watched really kind of grew up as the hip hop scene grew up. And at that time, it wasn't anything you would see on television or hear on the radio. It was something you saw on the streets. So in that same way, I mean, in Bombay and in many parts of India, the hip hop scene is starting. It's street music. It's not manufactured. It's not being created in studios. It's something that, I mean, now it's become a mainstream thing, but it really came from the streets. So in that way, it's an authentic hip hop scene, which is exactly like the original scene that came from New York. But then all over the world, you see these scenes happening. Any country you go to, there's a street hip hop scene that's authentically come from, these kind of like street ciphers where people were battle, and the real MCs would appear and emerge from from this culture.
How was it like working with Ranveer Singh? He is somebody who understands the craft very well. How was
Mm.
it working with him in the studio? You, of course, made him sing for your tracks.
I mean, he's a consummate professional. When he came to the studio, he was just sitting there learning and practicing, and kind of sitting in a corner with a pad and pen, you know, constantly working on his craft and being able to nail it, and very humbly so as well. Like he was, we were in the studio with Kambari and myself and Ankur Tiwari, and kind of building this piece. And he was amazing. I think that on everything that he wound up performing on, he really had to learn. Um, he had to become the character that was going to project these songs, and that I think he did an amazing job.
Looking back, what do you think is your most enduring memory from Gully Boy?
I think there was a moment while we were in the middle of the background score, um, where I got the feeling. I remember sitting there in the evening watching some of the edits that we had worked on, some of the cues we had worked on that day, and getting the feeling that, much like I made an analogy to Saturday Night Fever, which happened in the '70s in America, where, one day this disco scene that they've made this kind of low budget film around was a street thing, and it wasn't really mainstream. And then all of a sudden this film, it made this disco scene explode. I kind of got that feeling with this film, that once Gully Boy comes out, there's going to be a bit of a cultural explosion around this kind of music.
Is it fair to say that Anurag Kashyap and Zoya Akhtar are two Bollywood filmmakers who understand your music better and they give you enough room to experiment?
Yeah, I mean, that was the reason to be asked in the first place. I think everybody has their go-to guy, that they, know that they'll get the best of what they're looking for. So, in that way, I'm not on that many Bollywood radars, in terms of being the go-to guy. So it's always nice to be asked, so if Anurag asks me, I know that he, even when we first initially started talking, he was like, I've done my bit for the film. Now I want you to, tell your story through the music, which is the kind of artistic relationship that I look for, in a situation. So it's a little more rare that it happens, but when it does, it's usually special.
Sorry for being late to the party, but the other album of yours, which I enjoyed thoroughly, is Up. And the one song I got hooked to, I think it's the title track, where you use the sounds from the airport. That's very innovative. Like, who would have imagined using airport sound in a musical way? How did that come about?
That was, during the time that Up was being created, which was between 2014 and 2016 was the time I was really working on that album. I was going back and forth between New York and India, besides everywhere else I was traveling, at least 13 to 15 times a year. And I was constantly, on this long 15-hour journey back and forth. And that became the place where, Up was the title, because I was spending so much time up in the air, looking out the window and kind of imagining and being inspired by the last thing that I was leaving, and as well as thinking about what I'm about to fly into, because usually it would from work straight into work, getting off the flight and jumping straight into something else. So that was kind of the inspiration for the sounds of the airport became nostalgic, and I think that is how people hear it when they hear it on the album.
You have recently composed the background score for two web series, A Simple Murder and Smoke.
Yeah.
Are you more comfortable composing background scores than soundtracks for movies and web series? And are we going to see more of Karsh Kale in India now? Is there a plan to shift from New York to Mumbai?
I mean, like I said, I've been going back and forth for the last 20 years. And I've, for me, I'm most comfortable having both feet in both places, being able to go because I'm able to still continue my work here while I'm in Brooklyn, and continue the work that I'm doing there while I'm in Goa or while I'm in Bombay. So I like to keep, both places, open, as my playing ground. But yeah, I mean, in terms of whether I'm more comfortable doing background scores give me a lot of space to, I think, do what I do, which is I do a lot of landscape kind of, work. And I like to, as opposed to when I write songs, they're oftentimes very specific to my style and to what I have to say. So soundtrack work tends to be sometimes writing songs that are for a character, and which I have done. I did all the songs in the last Anurag Kashyap film on Netflix, the Choked, which was a lot of fun. Because I think for him that there's a quirkiness to the characters that you're supposed to be kind of channeling through. So the music itself takes on a whole different, interesting twist. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, when I write songs, I'd rather put them out as my own songs.
Yeah, you're a perfectionist when it comes to music. You, of course, made electric tabla. And, please talk to us about its sound and what was the objective behind this innovation?
Well, I mean, what I did was kind of create my own instrument, which was the electric tabla. There have been many experiments with putting microphones inside tablas, which started in the 70s. It started, I'm sure, even before that. Mickey Hart from the Grateful Dead, Zakir Hussain, Trilok Gurtu. These guys were trying all kinds of different stuff. And then, of course, there was Talvin Singh in London who created the Tablatronics. So we've all done our own version of the experiment of creating electronic tablas and internally mic'd tablas. For me, it was, it came out of necessity because I was playing with a lot of different artists in New York City, and it was very hard to be heard when you're on a stage with, bass and drums and guitars and keyboards and electronics. Then once I created the electric tabla, I was able to be as loud as all the other instruments, and then of course play through effects and create a whole nother personality for the tabla.
On the film front, he of course collaborated with Shankar Ehsaan Loy and Salim Suleiman. While working with them, what was that one quality that you observed and you think is required to compose music for Bollywood?
Patience. I think what they have is the artistry of being able to navigate all of the different kind of elements that are a part of, you're part of making a film. So you're part of a department of people. And you're not just speaking to one person, you're speaking to a director, you're speaking to a director's assistant. You have 7 different people working for you. So there's that. I think more than anything, being able to navigate, it's a very different world than anything else. And especially in Bollywood, because there's the personalities that come to the studio, in the Bollywood world as well, that you have to navigate. So, anytime I've ever worked with any of these guys in the studio, that's something that I've always walked away very impressed with, is their ability to navigate that world with grace.
And how comfortable
I'm
are
not
you?
as comfortable, to be honest with you. I do, and I have on many an occasion worked within that world, but I'm definitely someone who likes to keep jumping from one space to another. So after I've done a film, I'd rather do something else. I'd rather go on tour, or I'd rather do a studio album, or I'd rather collaborate with someone, or do it, work on a TV series, or, just do something else, as opposed to keep kind of doing the same thing over and over again. So if I do find myself in a situation that's challenging, then I'll find my, alternative.
Sure. We often ask filmmakers and actors to name a film that changed their life. But with you, it's the 18th century musical instrument tabla that played a big role and that changed your life. Would you like to talk to us about how it got your attention while growing up in America?
Well, I mean, my father was the first one to introduce me to the instrument, just through playing music in the house, playing a lot of classical music, a lot of Indian film music, a lot of Marathi Launi. So I was hearing a lot of Indian percussion and tabla. But one day he took me to see Zakir Hussain, and I saw him live, and that was where the entire universe of tabla really opened up for me, and I was hooked on a journey, and that journey being, I wasn't hearing the nostalgia of the repertoire that Zakir Bhai was performing because I was 7 years old. What I was hearing was possibilities of things that I had never thought of before. And it was a language that obviously was eloquent enough that I was understanding what was being said, but it was also a language that I felt like could be spoken all over the world in different contexts. So I was, more than to become a fantastic classical tabla player, my pursuit was always to bring tabla into places that it's never been before.
Wow. You said that New York City had a big influence on you, on your music while growing up.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to explain how it shaped your music and your career?
New York City was, I grew up on Long Island, initially Queens and then Long Island. So then I came to New York as a student at NYU. And New York immediately was the most diverse place that I'd ever been in my life. And I was so inspired by the fact that people were not only coming from, it wasn't a homogenized space where people felt like New Yorkers. You felt like you were amongst people from all over the world, and people wore their culture on their sleeve, and they would reinvent themselves as an urban New York version of this person who's from this other place in this world, in the world. So that was very inspiring for me in order to kind of find my own cultural identity as well as my own sonic identity as a musician.
World Music Day is coming in few weeks from now. Mm-hmm. What message would you like to give to your listeners, to your fans?
I'd like to say to my fans and to, as many people who, that this reaches, just to, to stay safe and stay hopeful that things are going to change for the better. And we're going to find newer and better ways of doing the things that we feel like we're not able to do right now. Things are very scary and things are very unsure. But yeah, it's always important for us to keep hope alive, and and keep. And music is a very inspiring way to, get through the day. So that's what we're doing, keeping our part in being able to, share something that helps us cope with what we're all going through together.
And finally, post this album, what can we expect from Karsh Kale's musical treasure?
Well, this album right now, this is an EP. That's the first half of an album. So it's called Touch One. Touch Two will be coming out in July, which is another half of Touch. And then about a month later, there'll be a remix album of the entire Touch album with a lot of really amazing guest producers, which I won't mention yet, but it'll be coming out. That'll be coming out in the fall. So that's what's coming out in the near future.
Karsh Kale, thank you so much for talking to us. And in
Awesome.
the end, may I please request you to give a medley of your favorite tracks to end this interview?
Okay, I'll give you some sort of medley.